Welcome, everyone. This is Wild Ones Greater Baltimore. My name is Amanda Ray. I'm president of the chapter, and with me is Ann Neo, vice president. And we are really excited to present along with Chesapeake Bay chapter. They're co-hosting. We're excited to hear Debbie Schwartz discuss habitat gardening. I am going to tell you a little bit about Debbie and then a little bit about our Wild Ones chapter, and then we'll get started. Once Debbie starts, she's going to continue her presentation and then take questions at the end. Debbie grew up in New England, where she spent a lot of her time outside in the natural world. She's been a Baltimore City Master Gardener since 2002 and is the former chair of the Baywise Committee. She's also an Audubon Habitat Ambassador. And she is certified to teach environmentally sustainable practices and writes educational material for the University of Maryland Extension. Her garden is a demonstration garden for Baywise and for Audubon. If she is going to plant something, it has to feed someone, either wildlife or people. I like that. Okay, so quickly I will go through some of our slides. Wild Ones is nationwide, and this organization promotes the use of native plants through local and national educational programs. They have 94 chapters and 25 seedling chapters in 36 states. And if you would like to join, or if you know someone that would like to join, go to join.wildones.org. And all of the chapters have a shared mission, and that is to advocate for native landscapes through education and community action. Our vision is native plants and natural landscapes thriving in every community. We like to inspire change through shared core values, which are respect for each other, for nature, and for the earth. We are an inclusive community and we welcome everyone. We share the latest evidence-informed strategies, and we grow through learning, action, and sharing of knowledge. Why does Wild Ones exist? Well, we believe in a healthy planet that starts with native plants. Dwindling biodiversity is a threat to the foundation of life on Earth. That should interest everyone, right? In the last century alone, we've lost millions of acres of diverse ecosystems to urbanization. Okay, so I will now yield the floor. And welcome, Debbie, and I'm excited to hear what she has to say.
Thank you, Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everybody. I am so honored to speak to this group. I'm really excited about this. I know that there's some extraordinary gardeners in your group and on this Zoom tonight, and I know that there's also gardeners at every stage. So I'm going to do an overview, and I find that a lot of people are interested in a particular area and really become expert in it. But my aim is to give you an overview of how everything fits together so that you can make more informed choices and so that you can teach other people to make more informed choices. Okay, so a beautiful garden. Next slide.
Okay.
Yep, next slide. Sorry, next slide. Okay, so there it is. This was always our ideal of what a beautiful garden was. Extremely controlled, right? I guess what I should say first is that there's two things that we need to remember. One is that what you're seeing there is not grass. It is lawn or turf. Grass is the good stuff that we plant that helps sustain our biodiversity. The second thing is we'll refer to Frederick Law Olmsted as Freddie Low. So here is a Freddie Low garden that is all turf or sod or lawn. And the whole idea was we have to control everything. Nature's bad, it's scary, and we've got to beat it back and keep it under control. Most people know that or believe that lawns started with the French and the English gentry, and it was to show wealth and to make these parterre gardens. But it actually started before then with the Scottish. And what the Scottish castle, people in Scottish castles, the Lord of the Manor or whoever it was, figured out was that if they have grass around the castle, not woods, then they can see their enemies coming from further away. So that's why they maintained grass, and it was very expensive, but they maintained that so they could see their enemies. Well, we no longer have to worry about that. So we no longer have to do this. Okay, so next. So we have to start thinking of our yards and our gardens as habitats, because all of us need to sustain life and our biodiversity in our own gardens. So this is what a beautiful habitat looks like. And it's, very under control. You can see the pathway. There's beautiful things. There's multiple layers that we'll talk about later. And it's just absolutely beautiful and feels completely different than that first garden we saw that was so controlled. Next. So habitat gardening is sort of a term I made up because I couldn't find a term out there that really fit how I think about how we should interact with the landscape. So I see it as a holistic way of gardening that emphasizes environmental stewardship to protect our biodiversity and keep our air and water clean. It involves stopping erosion, planting native plants, gardening organically, and allowing nature to cycle and work its magic. Pretty much just have to get out of the way. Okay. So what we used to have, you'll see in the center, is a green filter. And when it rained, the rain would be filtered through many layers. First the canopy trees, then under canopy trees and shrubs and grasses, and then go through soil that wasn't sealed off with either cement or sod. And it would filter all the pollution and slowly sink into the ground. We didn't have major flooding and erosion. But what has happened is we have created a gray funnel, the picture on the right. So now everything just rushes off of big buildings and large rooftops onto macadam, into storm drains, and there's no way to filter anything. So what's happened is, if you look at the picture on the left, this was taken maybe only 10 years ago in the Inner Harbor. This is what the Chesapeake Bay looked like before we started cleaning it up. And the Chesapeake Bay was established around an oak forest, and we've lost 50% of the oak buffer. The reason oaks are so important, and I'll go into more of that later, but the tannins in the leaves, the leaves are kind of thick. It's because they have tannins in them, and the tannins in the leaves actually filter water. Amazing, right? Okay, next slide. So we've sealed off the earth with turf and with pavement. Turf is just very dense, and it doesn't let the water through, and it doesn't let the soil naturally amend itself. So trees can no longer find purchase anywhere, just the seeds from the trees. So normally trees are just, growing all the time. There's new ones sprouting all the time. But now that they don't have the opportunity to do that, so if we don't plant a tree, we're not going to have any trees. Okay, next. So native plants. What are native plants? I think all of you know this. I'm preaching to the choir, which feels great. They naturally occur in the region in which they've evolved, and they've adapted to the local soil, rainfall, and temperature conditions. And all wildlife have evolved with them. If you've ever wondered, how do birds and animals know what to eat, what they can eat and what's poisonous? It's because it's genetically coded, because the plants and the animals evolved together, which is super cool. So they will not eat something that they do not recognize as nutritious. And the problem is we have all these non-native plants, and a lot of them are thugs, and they've taken over. And so our wildlife is starving because they don't recognize those things as nutritious. They want to survive. They're not going to eat those things. And yep. So another important thing about native plants that most people don't think of is how deep the roots are. You see on the left, the non-native plants, they're just really shallow rooted. Look at the fescue turf. It's like 1 inch. So on the right are native plants. Common 9-bark is got roots that go down 14 feet into the ground. If you want to break up soil and amend soil deep down, if you want something great in your rain garden, a 9-bark is amazing. But all these things, the grasses are amazing because they have really thick roots. Like look at the prairie dropseed. I mean, that is a major root system for the size plant you have. Okay, next. So how do you find your native plants? How do you know what to plant? I think most of you are probably familiar with this, the Native Plant Guide. And it's just for our area, and it's absolutely fabulous. If you go to the next slide, it's really easy to use. You can look up by section if you want a tree, whatever it is you're looking for, and it tells you exactly the conditions that it needs. It also tells you the size when it's fully grown, not in 5 years like nurseries do. Like, what kind of help is that? And it also shows you what wildlife it supports. So I always say to people, if you have this, you don't need me. You can just go in, do your own research from the height to the amount of soil, the type of soil, how much wetness. Okay, next slide, please. So we need to think in layers. The way you get the most wildlife value is to have every layer. And if you think about when you're in a forest, the reason it feels so good is because there is every layer. That's what's natural. You don't go from a canopy tree to grass. There's all these other sublayers in between. And it's important because different insects and animals live in the different layers. And this will, if you do all the layers, it will sustain all the animals and all the insects. And imagine if you're a little caterpillar and you are in a canopy tree and you fall out of the tree. If you're not caught by an understory tree and then caught by a shrub and then grasses, you're going to go straight to the ground and splat, you're dead. So it's really a wonderful, perfect system. And when you achieve this in your garden, it feels wonderful. Okay. So this is what a garden looks like, that all the layers are planted in. You can see on the very top the white pine, there's some canopy trees, and then there's a dogwood under canopy, and then you can see shrubs of different heights, and then the perennials and grasses and shorter things. And again, I'm preaching to the choir, but planting native trees, and the 3 keystone trees, if you guys aren't familiar, that's Doug Tallamy, the brilliant entomologist, says the 3 trees that are the best for our area are the white oak, the black cherry, and the willows. And we're going to go talk more about the white oak in a little while, but if you're going to just do one thing to help the environment in Maryland, it's plant a white oak tree. Okay. Here we go. So Doug Tallamy says, a yard without an oak is a yard that is not reaching a quarter of its potential. A white oak tree, they're the lungs of our city. They produce enough oxygen in 1 year for 2 people to live. They increase your property value by buffering noise pollution and by creating shade, right? If you plant deciduous trees on the southern side of your house, you're going to have shade in the summer and you're going to have sun in the winter. And that's what folks used to do before there was air conditioning. And then if you really want to be a pro, on the northwest corner, you'd put an evergreen to block those winds. Okay, oaks house up to 500 animal species with food and shelter. They filter our water with the tannin-filled leaves, like I was saying, produce thousands of acorns in one season, and they slow water runoff. They fill aquifers, they decrease flooding, they battle erosion. They also support over 534 different beneficial bugs and insects. I mean, amazing. If you're going to spend the time and the money and the energy to plant a tree that is going to be so beneficial and be really big and is going to last for a long time. Costs the same as planting a small, ornamental, short-lived tree. Okay. So another thing to keep in mind is evergreens, which provide shelter for wildlife. Sweetbag magnolia is one of my absolute favorites. It's not a canopy tree, but it's a wonderful tree for our city because houses are built so close together. And this is pretty much a vertical evergreen screen. So it's multi-trunked. You can control how big you want it to get, how wide you want it to get. But I have it in between my house and my neighbors, and we both have this, we could still see each other's houses, but there's this lovely screen in between. And it flowers, and it is a huge wildlife sustainer, particularly for birds. The buds on the, or rather the seed buds, the seed pods make lots of food for the birds. The northern bayberry is a shrub, and I think it's very overlooked. It is evergreen. There aren't that many evergreen natives, and it produces a berry that has the fattiest content. And Susie Creamer and Aaron Reed from Audubon, who are fabulous. If you haven't heard them speak, I recommend it, have taught me that it's the fattiest bird and the fattiest berry for birds who are migrating, and they want something that really is going to sustain them. And it's beautiful, it's evergreen, and it produces this beautiful glaucous blueberry. Okay. And so again, the white oak, and it just keeps coming up. It's one of the best ways to support our biodiversity, as is the black cherry. And again, my friends from Audubon have taught me that the winged sumac supports all 8 families of birds in all 4 seasons. So that's a real bullseye for helping the birds. Nectar-rich natives for pollinators. And so for me, Joe Pye, these are the 3 that really are the hardest working in my garden. It could be different for different people, but like the hyssop, it starts to bloom in May, and it's covered in bees all the way through October or November, depending on the weather. And remember to plant things in masses. It's nicer as far as design goes, but also if you're a tiny little bee or bird or bug way up high, it's hard to identify where there's a beneficial plant if there isn't a mass of them. And also, once you finally reach a good plant and the exhausted bird or bee finally gets to it, you want to let them forage efficiently. So let them hang out there for a while and rest and eat and get their fill before just a little snack before they have to find the next plant. Okay. Don't forget to put in some fall blooming plants for pollinators. There's lots of action all summer long, but in fall things really quiet down. And I'm all of these, but I have Coral Bell, the Autumn Bride, right in my front, and it is literally nectar. It's covered with bees through November. Okay. So for the sake of time, I'm not going to go over every native shrub, but there's tons of native shrubs, and they all bloom and berry at different times. And I remember when Aaron Reed from Audubon came to my garden to certify it, and we were talking about what is best to support the birds. And I said, well, why don't I make my whole garden a bird feeder, and then I don't need a bird feeder? Just, put all the right plants in. And, you build it and it will come. I'm lucky enough to be on Stony Run, so there's a little bit of there's water, and there's also I'm on the green band, there's trees, but the amount of wildlife I get living in Baltimore City is really amazing. Okay, and host plants for butterflies. Spice bush, amazing. All these native plants that just keep on giving. They have medicinal properties for us. They feed the wildlife. The spice bush, it smells delicious. You can make tea from its leaves. The berries, you can use it as a spice. Parsley is amazing. Mostly the lepidopterists want ferny plants, but for some reason parsley, although it's not ferny, they love it anyway. And I use that as ground covers. I'll use that. I use oregano, bee balm, mint. And when I walk along, I get aromatherapy. Okay, next. And hummingbirds. So Lots of great plants for hummingbirds. The honeysuckle, the native honeysuckle, is so beautiful. And after it matures, when it gets to be about 5 years old, then it also produces a berry in the fall. And the berry then feeds more birds. So you get the hummingbirds and then you get other birds. Monarda, cardinal flower. Oh, I planted some jewelweed by my garden gate because I'm always doing work on the trail and I get a lot of poison ivy, and jewelweed, when you break the stem, the liquid inside helps to alleviate the itching from poison ivy. So I put it by my garden gate and it has a little orange like trumpet flower, and guess what? I got hummingbirds from my jewelweed. So it's just it's a much quieter garden. There aren't as many wow moments when it's all native, but there's so much going on, and it's just a great part of gardening to be able to just watch and observe and see what's happening when you put the plants in. So additional ways to support wildlife. Although all of our herbs are not native, they all support wildlife. The lavender is terrific for pollinators, and then anything ferny, again, like the dill and the carrots. I have a perennial bronze fennel, and that's all great for the lepidopterist, but all these are great to have in your garden, and we could just share. Okay, water sources are so important. In the center, I just took this picture today. I don't know if you can see all the little bird feet in the snow, but it's really important to have a winter water source because everything freezes. And, you know, the birds, everyone loves to put out a bird feeder, but most people don't think about the water source in the winter. If you have a heated bird bath, you will have the hottest place in town and you will enjoy its constant visitors. Again, mass planting. Okay, so here we are, shelter for wildlife. So leaving decaying wood is fantastic. I went out, this was a few years ago, to take a picture of my brush pile, and I did a close-up because there on the brush pile was our little resident gardener snake. And the little girls next door named him Socks, which I think is hysterical. And it turns out it's a female because she was pregnant. My neighbor, who's a bio professor, when I called him over, I thought that my snake had a mouse in its stomach. He said, nope, she's pregnant. They don't eat mice. So there she is. There's Socks. Leaving the leaves, right? So important. It gives a place for the animals to shelter, to forage. It keeps your garden has a nice warm blanket over the garden. And the bugs lay their eggs on the leaves in the fall. If you take them away, it doesn't allow them to go through their process and emerge in the spring. So you're killing the next generation of the beginning of the food chain. So we really do have a perfect system. And every time we mess with it, we mess it up. See how these leaves go right up to the tree? Then when the lepidopterists are born, when the caterpillars are born, they'll be able to climb up the tree into safety. So we have to remember that every time we make a change in the environment, we affect it in a negative way. We have to just go back to living really low impact and gently. Okay. The next one. Okay, so erosion control, there's lots of ways to do it. We have to have flat surfaces where we can walk, but something like this is a great solution. There's lots of room in between the pavers so that water can be absorbed. And the next one, pebbles. This is the path to my back garden, and I have pebbles. Then they're bigger because it's on a hill, and if I had put in the pea gravel, it would have all kind of rolled down the hill. Also, the right plant for the right spot. Those are sensitive ferns. It's shady and it's wet. That's at the bottom of the hill. So the sensitive ferns have gone crazy because it's the perfect conditions for them. So I'm into finding the right plant for the right spot and making it easy. And this is my driveway. It's two cement strips with river rocks in between because it goes down this hill still, and it stops erosion. And then in the summer, all these native perennials volunteer. So I have flowers in the middle of my driveway, which is delightful. Okay, so why should we replace our lawn or turf? Well, lawn and turf requires chemical and mechanical maintenance. So that's a big carbon footprint. It doesn't support our biodiversity in any way. It creates erosion because water sheets right off of it. And it seals off the earth, preventing natural regeneration of plants and natural soil amendment. So what is so great about soil? I mean, about turf? Nothing. Next. So there's lots of lawn alternatives to replace short-rooted dense turf. Sensitive fern I talked about, but there's so many things. I love Allegheny Pachysandra. That's a native Pachysandra to replace the Japanese Pachysandra. And it's more expensive and it's slow growing. There are places where you can find it and buy it bare root. That's what I did. And I planted it all, small roots about a foot apart. And they all came up in the spring beautifully, and they have now spread and filled in. Just a little bit of patience, but it's a shade plant, so there isn't as much weeding. But lots of sedges, caryxes. Mount Cuba did a fabulous study you can get on their caryxes and which ones grow best where, and some that you can even mow, and it can look more like a green path. Okay, and next. Controlling water runoff. So if you look on the top, this is a picture of a development, and it's all turf. But what this wise person has done is on the hillside has planted some deep-rooted perennials and grasses. So it will help with all that water that's going to be rushing down the hill. Creating a rain garden is fabulous, and I'm all for the biggest plants that can possibly fit. The bigger the plants, and the denser the plants, the more successful your rain garden is going to be. Okay. So I say protect the waterfront, and most people say, well, I don't live on the waterfront, but you live by a storm drain, and the storm drain goes into the water. So we all are pretty much living by a waterfront. And it doesn't matter if you're on the top of the mountain or if you're 10 feet away from the waterfront, everything is eventually going to go downhill and into the water. So we have to be mindful of everything we do because we need our water to be clean. So an easy way to eliminate your turf or your lawn is to increase your planting beds. You don't have to do it a lot, just like a foot a year. And before you know it, you will have a much smaller turf footprint, and you might even just keep going until you have none. We've learned that you should not dig up the soil, and you should definitely not rototill, because we've learned that soil has its own natural life and biome, and the mycelium and things that are working below should not be disturbed. When you rototill, not only are you replanting weed seeds, you're also chopping up earthworms and you're killing the life of the soil. So now what we do is put down cardboard and weight it down with mulch. And the cardboard will eventually just disintegrate, and it will amend the soil as it's disintegrating, and anything that doesn't have oxygen will die. But you have to cut everything down very, very low so you can eliminate all the oxygen. Okay. So garden maintenance. If you are going to have a completely native garden, and it's a much looser, airier, I think prettier garden, but it also doesn't look as formal and it is not as controlled. There's ways to let your neighbors know that it's intentional and that you're not being messy or you're not being a bad neighbor. And we call them cues for care. So signage is great. If you have your garden certified by Baywise or Audubon, or I know you guys now have a sign. Is that right? You have a sign? Yeah. That's fantastic because that shows that there's something intentional going on. Writing an article for your neighborhood newsletter. I mean, educating people is really the key. Speaking to your neighborhood, keeping pathways clear, and keeping doorways and windows unobstructed. And that's good for safety also. But you can also maintain a very low border in the very front of your garden by the sidewalk or the road, and it doesn't have to be turf. There's lots of other very low growing plants that you can make a border out of. Okay. And mulching appropriately. I think everybody should know that we don't do the volcano. It says there, BAD, bad. Proper mulching is more like a donut. The base of the tree is where the bark is how the tree stays alive. It brings the nutrients from the ground up into the crown. So if you cover the base and it rots, then it's going to kill the tree because it will no longer be able to do its job. So you don't want to really mulch more than 2 or 3 inches, never near the trunks. And it will inhibit regrowth, and it will retain moisture, and it will reduce erosion. Okay. So this is, a whole class in itself, but composting is super important. It's the number 2 thing you can do to help to eliminate methane gas. The number 1 thing is to reduce your airplane flights. But all of I think it's 40% of our food goes to waste in the United States, which is crazy. And it goes into a landfill and it doesn't have any oxygen. So it goes into this sort of purgatory and it just keeps releasing methane gas. So composting is definitely the way to go. And why would we ever give up any of our organic material? That's gold for our soil. Okay, this is my very favorite thing. I have a doggy poop septic system. And what I did was my husband borrowed our neighbor's pole digger, and he dug a hole 3 feet down into the ground. And then he scooped out the bottom to make a big bowl in the bottom. And then I happened to find this perfect square. It's like a pedestal, I think. I dug it up. It was under the soil in my garden. It's like a pedestal, but you can use anything. But I put that around the hole, and you can just drop the doggy poo down that hole. It goes down 3 feet, and it'll just start breaking down naturally and going back into the earth. Every once in a while, I'll do a little sprinkle of some white vinegar, but mostly nothing. And then I cover it with a bird bath. Or you can see on the left, I left the pooper scooper, you're welcome, just for scale. And so it's not that big. And then on the right, I just cover it up with a bird bath when I'm not using it. And it looks pretty. And I've got that little secret underneath, and I don't have to have any poop in plastic bags in my trash going into the landfill. It feels fantastic. So the rocks in the bird bath, I know there's no water in there. I did this the other day and it was too cold to put water in. But the rocks in the bird bath are for the birds so that they can judge the depth of the water. Again, my Audubon friends told me, always put rocks in the water in your bird bath. Okay. Managing yard pests. We try and do something called IPM, and we try and leave all the bugs and let the bad bugs get taken care of by the good bugs. That isn't working so well now because we have so many mosquitoes. Hopefully with this freezing cold weather, we won't have as many next summer. But Doug Tallamy, again, suggests making a mosquito trap by filling, and I actually went out and I just didn't want the plastic in my garden, and I invested in some galvanized buckets. And I have one in the front and one in the back filled with water, and then just a little bit of straw and leaves and grass, and you let it get kind of mushy. And you pop in like a quarter of one of these mosquito dunkers. and it attracts the mosquitoes. They lay their eggs in that water, and then it kills the larva. So I can't remember how long it lasts. It's on the internet. I think maybe like a month, and then you have to redo it. But you only need about a quarter of a mosquito dumpling for each one. Okay. Watering efficiently. There's only so much water on this earth. Got to save it. So especially with these crazy droughts we've been having. So soaker hoses are extremely easy and extremely efficient. Much better than an overhead sprinkler. Another thing that I never thought of, I learned this from Doug Tallamy, is reducing our lights because first of all, birds navigate by the stars. So if there's really bright lights, they get confused. I also attract things, like a moth to a flame. So white lights are the worst. If you have to have a light, a amber light is much better. Motion sensors can really reduce light pollution. And every light should have a hat, because you don't have to light up into the sky. You have to light down into the ground where you are. And the worst thing are those uplights into trees, because the trees then don't know if it's day or night, which I'd never thought of. But if you have those uplights on those trees, then they're not going to know, they're going to lose their cycle, and they're not going to be as healthy. So again, everything we do to change the environment has an impact. A great thing to do, I'm all for permaculture, right? So we're going to work with nature, not fight against it. We're going to put the right plant in the right place. If it's shady and wet, we're going to put something that likes wet shade. If you have to plant on a hill, you can dig a little ditch above and capture the water, and that way the plant will get watered and it won't erode. Just sort of stopping, being still, looking at your site, looking at what the different dimensions of it are, and figuring out how to work with it. Very, very Zen. So I'm not going to go into a huge thing on all these invasive plants, but I think we all know what they are. They're not native to the region. They don't support our biodiversity in any way. They escape into the wild, and they outcompete and replace native plants. Think if you are an importer of plants, and you aren't just going to import any plant, you're going to import the thugs. You're going to import the plants that you know are going to survive no matter what. So the plants that we get from other countries are real thugs. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And I say non-native plants don't play nice with native plants. So, and I also call them billboards, because most native plants are very airy and ferny, and just, the air flows through them. And a lot of the plants from other continents I call billboards, because they're very stiff and they're very thick, and there's no airflow. And so it's sort of like getting a bouquet of wildflowers and then having one like big hot house rose stuck in with it. And something's not right. It doesn't feel quite right, but you can't really identify what it is. Once you're in an all-native garden, you can feel the difference. It doesn't have to be all not native, but the more native plants you get and the more ways you see it helps the environment and what it attracts, the more, well, I at least became more interested in having more native plants. Sort of a nice cycle. So this is so important. How to eradicate non-natives. Never ever do what this woman is doing here on the right, window cutting. Not only do you have double the opportunity to insult the bark and have disease and insects go into the bark, but you're not removing the root. And when you cut something, especially an invasive that's really strong, when you cut it, it makes it want to grow more. So you cut it and it kind of doubles up, doubles down, and then puts out twice as much growth. So you're actually stimulating those ivy vines to grow more. What you must do is cut it at the bottom and leave enough so you can grab a hold of it and pull it out by the root. Everyone says, oh, you know, I keep taking ivy and it just keeps growing and growing, and it's because the root must be removed. And never ever tear the ivy off the tree, because again, you're going to be insulting the bark and stressing a tree that's already stressed. It's very therapeutic. I know I just want to do it all the time, just rip it off, but leave it be. After you cut it at the bottom and take out the root, it will die and it will fall off naturally. It just will take a couple of years. And it's very satisfying to look at that tree and see all the dead ivy on it. Okay. For things like trees that you can't dig out the root, University of Maryland Extension says to cut it, and I always cut it on a diagonal, kind of low, so I get as much surface area as possible. And then with an herbicide and a paintbrush, just the edge, just where the bark is, just the very edge, you can just very, very gently put a little bit of herbicide just along there, and be really careful and responsible with it. If you cut down something like a white mulberry tree, it's going to be like a hydra, and 50 more are going to come out of the root system. So unfortunately, we have to do that, and it's sort of the lesser of the evils. Okay, so anyway, there's going to be pages and pages here of different invasives, and we all in our neighborhoods have similar. Here, I know there's a ton of porcelain berry, and we have a ton of white mulberry, a ton of garlic mustard. So I call it triage gardening, and I just go for the thing that's going to be going into seed next, and just kind of go after all that. If you can learn what they look like when they're teeny little babies, it's so much easier just to walk around your garden in the morning with a cup of coffee and just pluck out those little seedlings before they become big and hard to manage. So anyway, on and on and on. We have all these, kind of whip through these. I used to make flashcards and have, you know, pictures in all different stages and from far and near. But now with the internet, you can use iNaturalist is the one I like. There's a lot of apps, and you can identify all these really easily now. There's the garlic mustard, knotweed. Okay, we can continue. Okay. So, changing your garden into a habitat can be done slowly over time. We don't have to be hysterical and do it all at once. First thing that you have to do, the number one thing you have to do when you're changing your garden, is to identify and remove all the alien invasives. We've got to level the playing field. And then you always do your hardscapes first. So you create your patios, pathways, and install your fences, because you don't want to have to dig up plants to do this.
It's like,
we do
what?
it first. Then we plant our canopy trees, the tallest thing first. Those are the bones. That is the structure of your whole garden. Think that those are the things you can't move later, right? So you want to put them in first. You want to make sure you have them in the right place, your canopy and under canopy trees. And then you can start with all your lower things. And I call that painting. The lower things are all things that you can move if you need to. Over 80% of the land in the US is privately owned, and it's mostly divided into tiny little parcels like we have here in Baltimore. If everyone just made one change, it would be huge. So hats off to all of you guys who are interested in native plants and are native plant people. You're my people. A last thought is children spending less time outdoors has been linked to decreased appreciation of our environment, health problems, including childhood obesity and vitamin D deficiency, diminished use of the senses, attention difficulties, and higher rates of emotional illness like anxiety and depression. People say, well, where are my children going to play if I don't have any grass or, turf, whatever? And the thing is, we've got parks, we've got fields everywhere. Children need to be out in nature. They need to be using their imagination, building things with sticks, observing things, making forts, turning over rocks. There's plenty of things to do. And gardens change by the day. So think about a different type of environment for a child to play in. Oh, this is a shameless picture of me and my grandson. So how about planting a tree for every child that's born and teaching them how to care for their tree? I think that every child that's born should have a tree. Or planting a tree to commemorate any special occasion or in remembrance of someone. We all have so much stuff. What we need is trees. Trees are what is holding up this whole system. So I think it's the greatest gift and that you can give someone. And I planted trees for my kids when they were born, and they still go and see their trees. They absolutely love that. And now I'm doing it for my grandchildren, and it feels great. So let's plant trees for future generations. And thank you so much. I can't wait to see what your questions are and answer them. And feel free to email me anytime. I'd love to answer your questions. I'll try my best. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Debbie. That was really thorough. Very good. Loved it.
Great.
Yes. We do have some questions in the chat, and we can open it up to others also after we go through the chat questions. Let's see here. Okay. I struggle with gardening in partly or mostly shady areas. What suggestions do you have, and how do you add new small plants to mature garden areas?
Okay. I have mostly shade also, and I absolutely love it because in the summer I can be outside in my garden and when it's really, really hot. So there's lots of shade plants. Oops, I lost my gallery view. There we go. There are lots of shade plants, and it's just sort of rethinking about what you're looking at. It's much more subtle. It might be the texture of a leaf or the shape of it or the shade of green. And there's a lot of shade plants that do flower, but shade plants are more subtle, and it is a different way. But I always say I have a good problem, big trees. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yes. Okay. If we leave the leaves, is there a compensation for composting, maybe paper? We leave many leaves, but I'm curious about options. I guess looking for more browns for their compost pile.
Oh, okay. Well, you don't have to leave the leaves forever. I try and leave them till at least May because I really don't know. There used to be these recipes like if there's 5 days of 50 degrees and above, then you can take your leaves. And I've now learned that that's not really true, that different bugs emerge and do things at different times. So I think, I can't say exactly, but I would think by May, you could chop up your leaves and use them as mulch. But I also, there's lots of things that need to be cut back. And if you cut something back and you put it on the sidewalk or somewhere in the sun, like on your porch, it's going to turn brown in a few days. So you can always make carbon that way. Shredding brown paper. I believe the New York Times, if anyone still gets the hard copy, I believe it's with soy ink. You can shred that. Yeah, the other thing is chip drop is amazing if you have the room for it. It's free. It's a clearinghouse for arborists. They have to pay to dump their chips. So they're more than happy to come in and dump them in your yard, and you can get a whole bunch of chips.
Okay, and then you might have already covered this, but what month in spring is the best time to take up the leaves?
Yeah, so, again, that's hard. I think there's still a lot of debate, and I don't think there is any hard science on it because there's so many specialist insects. But I think by May that that's when I do it. I try and wait as long as possible.
Okay, so we have a question about, is there any type of lawn kids can play in? So I assume they're talking about native
Yeah.
covers.
Well, again, Mount Cuba has done these fabulous. Is everyone familiar with Mount Cuba? It's a 400 acres of native forest, and it's about an hour from here. It's up near Winterthur, and they do incredible studies. We're really lucky to have them for all the Mid-Atlantic. And they've just done a whole study on carex, and they say the ones that can go well in the sun, in the shade, the ones you can mow. So that's one idea. The other idea is to just, grow mint and things that are just really grow very quickly and easily, and just mow it down. But, mulch pathways in between beautiful plants my grandson is very happy outside and plays for hours, and I have no grass.
I've seen northern bayberry listed as deciduous, only sometimes semi-evergreen in southern locations. Have you experienced northern bayberry as semi-evergreen in your location?
Yeah, that's true. It's supposed to be evergreen here now that our zone has changed, I believe. But with the cold weather we've been having, the unusual cold weather we've been having, it seems to turn purple and really flag, and sometimes we lose the leaves. But yeah. So, it's just our weather is so variable now. It's hard to really, I think that there's the southern wax myrtle, I think, holds its leaves better maybe. And I know it has more fragrance and has a small, finer leaf. Don's dwarf, I think, is one.
Any recommendations on buying bulk mulch, maybe free of chemicals as much as possible? And someone did put the chip drop link in here, which is helpful. But
oh, great. I buy nothing. All I do is get rid of stuff, but I did invest in a chipper, and it just gives me such joy. Whenever there's a big windstorm and all my neighbors, they don't want their sticks and that have dropped from the trees. I'm that crazy lady who goes and collects all of them, and I put it through my chipper, and I just have mulch whenever I want it. And it's a Sun Pro, I think. It wasn't, how much was that, honey? I don't know. I want to say, I don't know. It was not expensive if you consider it paid for itself in bags of mulch in one time. So, and then I don't have to go to Home Depot. I don't have to go to that hot parking lot. I don't have to get things in plastic that come from I don't know where, that have I don't know what. And so I think mine chips up to 1.5 inch caliper, which is pretty big. So I got rid of my leaf chopper, and now I have a chipper. Yeah.
Okay, and I don't know if if someone's asking if the non-native lilac is invasive.
It's not great. I had one when I moved into this house, and because I had a stone wall. Well, I actually did have the stump ground. It was so old. My house is from 1904. I believe it was planted when the house was built, and it was leaning over, trying to get some sun. And I mean, it was just a mess, and was never pruned properly. So I had it taken out, and I had the stump ground, and I got hundreds of plants coming up from the roots. So I kind of think that's invasive. I mean, it was very, very old, but the roots just kept, I probably had 100 plants come up just from the roots, because again, it was cut and it stimulated it to grow more. So I don't think it's listed as invasive, but it definitely colonizes by Stalins, and it definitely was not my friend.
Okay, I'll just... Okay. Let me make sure it's the question. I'll just read it. I grow food when the soil is workable. I push the leaves to the side to aerate the soil and remove grubs. Then I mix those leaves in the soil for early season planting. But leaves are a great living mulch for my grow beds and bags. Soil always looks so great under them. Okay. There's no question there, but.
But thank you for not giving away your organic material and using it. Well done.
Okay, my very steep front lawn is planted with vinca. It's difficult to mow. What can I replace it with?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's sun or shade because vinca grows in both. But again, there's so many grasses and caryxes, and if it's shade, I love the native Pachysandra because it's pretty much evergreen, and it turns sort of purple and gets this white polka dot in the fall, and in the spring when it rejuvenates, it gets a very long white inflorescence. It's beautiful. So shade, that would be my number one. I know that Asarum canadensis is great for the shade too, but I don't put it in the front because it doesn't emerge until late and it dies back early. And in the front, I really want to have something showing. But what you might consider planting something on the hill other than, like, what about nine bark? Nine bark is great on the hill. I see my buddy Steve Kinsey's there. He did it. And it will colonize, and it's wonderful on a hill. It has those 14-foot deep roots, and it will really stabilize your hill. Or something like Clethra elnifolia would be fabulous, and that also colonizes by stolons, and it would move all over, and that can grow in sun or shade. So think of something a little bit taller than a ground cover if you can.
Okay. If you had to do it over again, would you use herbicide on your?
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I see Kay is on, and she said warm season grasses. Is that right, Kay? I bow to Kay, whatever she said is awesome. Let's all bow to Kay. Where is she? Warm season grasses, Kay?
Well, I'm seeing that it says full sun. So full sun.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, it says lots of sun. Thanks for the suggestions. And so for lots of sun, I go right to warm season grasses.
Yeah. And what about nine bark, Kay? Don't you think that would be nice?
So for me, nine bark, I think of nine bark where I first saw it growing in nature, which is on the bank of a small river in Virginia, and it was a huge masses. So I guess I would say it could be, but only if it's got some moisture. Because it's a slope is well drained, and that was it was a slope because it was a bank of a stream, but the water was there. So I guess I think of nine bark as wanting some moisture.
Okay.
But it's beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know. I think of it as the other. I have a friend right up here at the top of the hill that her nine bark are going crazy, and she's at the top of the hill.
Oh, it could be.
So I think it's tough.
I mean, she's not going to be a real high priority.
Okay, we just have a couple more, I think. Would you use herbicide when removing your lilac if you had to do it again? Or?
No.
No, still wouldn't do it. Okay.
I still wouldn't because I had the stump ground, and I was able to, it was hard, but I was able to dig and pull out all those long roots because they were kind of near the surface. So I wouldn't. I really save that for things that have a tap root, and I really try and use it, as infrequently as possible.
Okay. One final one, but I'm not sure what they're looking for exactly. What was the number one for shade? Oh, that was probably the carex. The Mount Cuba carex thing, I would guess. But I think I got everything in the chat.
I think the number one on Mount Cuba was Carex woodii. That's my recollection. And that's sun or shade.
Okay. Okay, and people are asking for some links or a list of some of the native shrubs and plants that you listed. So I don't know, this is being recorded, so we will have this up on our YouTube page so people can, feed through it and look at the slides too. But
yeah. Okay, well, anyone can email me at any time. I'm happy to, and tell me what your conditions are, and I'll be happy to make suggestions. But the guide from Fish and Wildlife really is fun to use, and you can buy it. I think it's $5, or you can just get the PDF for free online.
And Debbie, could you repeat your email address? I'll put it in the chat for people.
Sure, it's Debbie Swartz, the number 9 at gmail.com. I'm seeing my friend Terry saying that the guide is great.
Okay. All right. We're exactly at an hour. How did we do that?
I've done this before.
Thank you so much, Debbie. It was a really fun presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I was
And for
really
being open
honored
to
be
people
asked.
contacting you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you, Anne, as always, for your support and helping out during the meeting. And good to see
Hey,
Martha
Leaky.
here. Martha's on our board as well, friend of Debbie. She suggested
Yeah.
we bring Debbie in for a talk, and I'm really glad we did.
Hey, Martha.
We have some,
Debbie.
I'm just going to rattle off a couple more events we have coming up for people. We have a winter sewing workshop with Vanaya Frank, who's our co-vice president, and that's coming up on February 1st at 10 a.m.
I don't want to cut you off, but that is sold out. It's been sold out, so
Okay.
it
That's
was very popular.
yes. We also have with Michael Raup, the bug guy, we have a talk, in-person talk at the Natural History Society of Maryland, and that's called How Bugs Make the World Go Round. That's February 11th at 7 p.m. And then we also have another Zoom with Anna Lee of Perfectly Imperfect Gardens, and she's going to share her garden design tips. And that's on March 12th at 7 p.m. It's Designing Home Gardens with Native Plants. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Kelly, I think you just put something in the chat. We're going to be posting it on our YouTube page in the next couple of weeks. And so we don't have plans to email it out to people, but you can check it out on our YouTube page. So I hope that works. If you need additional information, feel free to reach out to us at wildonesbaltimore@gmail.com. Does anyone have any final questions before we sign off? Okay, Debbie, we have lots of thank yous. Terrific presentation. We just got to Debbie. Your whole presentation was very appreciated, and thank you again. We did enjoy it. Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Glad to see everyone
Okay.
here, and see you again next time.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.